Hi, it's Dia. Today is part 3 of coloring with pastels. And the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to just add a little bit of shadows with pencil. And I'm using a Statler antique mechanical pencil. That's a relatively new sharpener. And you push it in that little white dot to get rid of any dust. The first thing I'm going to do is do the very fine details around the center of the poppy. I added those actually after I published the book, and I'm going over the little seeds also. I like to add extra details to the coloring pages, and I just wanted to show you that you can too. Those little seeds are there, but I had colored it in with pastel. So now I'm going over it with that exceedingly sharp pencil. And I have a tendency to like that pencil and use it for details over pastels because, first of all, it feels really good to draw with. And I don't know if it's the lead or it's just like my favorite pencil, but I just love using it. Now, what I'm doing here is adding a little bit of shadow, and it's really easy also to use this pencil because the grit in the Conti pencils that I use let the lead just flow really, really easily. So what I'm doing now is I'm separating the petals just to highlight the areas some more. I'm using that pencil also to create shadows here. And the nice thing about using a lead or a graphite pencil over those Contis is that you can make very, very fine lines, but you can also almost blend the color with you can blend the color of the lead with the color of the pastel that you were using to sort of make like the perfect shadow. If a leaf appears like it's sitting on top of another leaf, I make a little bit of a shadow in between the two leaves on the side of the one that's behind to make it look more realistic. I'm still adding some shadows here. Now I'm going back in with the Conti red. It's actually a scarlet color. And I'm adding some orange in the stems. And by the end of this picture, I'll be adding more color to the green areas. I kind of went over the whole thing with a light green and a medium green. Now, in a field of poppies, it would not look like that. So they would also be in different stages of growth. Some of them would be a vibrant spring green. Some of them would be a darker green because they would be more mature. And some of them would be in a state of dying. So those would be darker, and those even lend themselves to a little bit of red. Now I'm going to do the seagull, and I pointed in that direction because I'm assuming the sun is coming from the left in this picture. And I like to determine that first because that determines where my shadows will be. So I'm taking I was going to say light gray, but it's a light-ish gray, and I can't even tell you what the colors are in the Conti pencils because they come in numbers. One of the one of the companies actually named them. I think it was Blick or Jerry's Artorama. And you know what? I'll look at those at the end and I'll put them in the box underneath. Now all I'm doing here is very quickly coloring the whole area, the whole wing area and the underbelly area of his feathers with the same gray. It looks like I'm just sort of, you know, haphazardly coloring, but there's a little bit of method to my madness. The feathers would have shadows and they sit on top of each other in a certain way. But this first layer of the Contis, it really doesn't matter because I'm going to be blending it with a stump. And I'm leaving that little area at the top of the wing or kind of closer to his back white. Because the sun would be, even though it's coming from that left direction, he's still outside and there would be a bit of a highlight even on his back. So now I'm taking the stump and I'm blending it, and I'm taking the extra gray that was on the stump and forming the indication of feathers. Again, a bit of a shadow. And I just saw a seagull in a parking lot today. And I realized that they're all so different. And the one that I saw today had almost little lines on his head, so I added that to this seagull too. I kind of went off the paper a bit, but I'm doing his feet in just a bit of gray. There we go. Now I'm taking this and I realized looking that I didn't do the web on that foot. So I just took that Faber-Castell pencil, added it, and I'm just now forming the base of his feet and his legs. The seagull that I saw today, the legs were almost like a mushroom color. And in my head, I almost assume, I guess since I was a child, that all the beaks and the feet of every bird that ever lived are yellow. I know it's not true, but I have to fight that. Now I'm just blending this in, just like I did the wings. Defining the shadow a bit there and smoothing it out. Making those feathers appear even more fluffy. Now I'm going to go over the curved parts of each feather. And it's a little bit stylized here, but I kind of wanted to do this for the video. Making a shadow underneath each feather kind of makes the feathers look a bit ruffled. But that's okay. I kind of like that look because, as you'll see in a bit, his tail is going to contain black also. And I thought that would be nice to do together. I thought it would be a nice look for the bird. Now here's an example of how you can blend with a graphite pencil. I'm adding a bit of feather marks here too. I don't know if I'm going to keep them, but it's okay because it's over a pastel. And it's a forgiving medium, unlike colored pencils where you hope that it erases. This is easier to go over the top of, and it's easier to smooth out and soften if you do change your mind or make a mistake. Now the underbelly, of course, would be a little more gray, a little more shadowed. And also the area under his wing, very close to his wing, would also have a subtle shadow. Going back in again for more definition. Making his knees a little bit more defined. Now, in all fairness, this is a picture from a coloring book. And I'm just showing this for techniques. You do not have to obviously go in and do all this, but I thought this was kind of fun to show. You can personalize it and make it your own. And I kind of made his face look like, obviously, a little bit of a grin. And he's a little more neutral than a straight seagull. Meaning you could sort of morph him into a blackbird or any kind of bird that you would like. Now I kind of went off the paper a bit here, but what I'm doing is drawing a few more lines up on top of his head. You know, just adding some more detail, making him more seagull-y. I'm using a really fine little stump to blend in the areas that I would consider shadows on the wing. Also adding some more little lines on his belly. And you can't see it, and I apologize, but I'm also just blending in those little lines up on his head. Now I'm adding a little bit of a sandy color to his beak. I also added that little black spot on the top of his beak because the seagull that I saw today had a black spot on his beak. defining the area around his eye a little bit. And I'm using teeny weeny little strokes. And I'm pressing very, very lightly. And by the way, that lead is a regular number 2 pencil lead. So I would say it's on the softer side. Now that's a Conti pencil again, in black. Just adding some more shadows. I wanted to make his tail stand out a bit. And I've seen some seagulls with black and white tail feathers. Now this is my version. I can't quite remember, and I didn't want to look it up. I just kind of wanted to make my own version. So these are a bit striking. And I couldn't remember if there was one white bar going through it or there were two, but I thought two would make this stand out a little bit because he's very, very neutral colored. He's gray and he's a little bit white and some off-white. So that looks kind of rough. I just laid that down very quickly, and I'm going to take a tiny blending stump again and just soften up those lines a bit so it doesn't look so rough. I'm going to add a little bit of pink to his feet. And then I'm going to go over the top of it and blend it in and add some more gray. I'm enhancing the webbing, and I'm just adding some shadow and making those knees look more like knees. I'm going to add that same neutral that I added on his beak to his legs. The underneath part of his beak would have a bit of a shadow, just like his underbelly. I'm going to fill in his eye a little bit more. I'm going to add some relatively harsh lines in the feathers, and those can stay that way because it is it's supposed to represent feathers, so they really don't have to be blended in. adding some white as highlight to the tips of those curves on the feathers. Now that is not the sharpest point in the world, and as much as I love Contis, that is the one thing that I don't like about Contis. They're very hard to sharpen. Another thing that's different from Conti pastel pencils and any kind of regular colored pencils is that with the Contis, I have used my fingers to blend, and you can go right over the top. If you tried to do that with colored pencils or even graphite pencils, the result isn't wonderful. It almost seems like it causes the surface to be very slick, very shiny, and you really can't go back over the top once you do that. It's not the same as burnishing, but it kind of feels the same. It makes it slippery and it just does not work. But with pastels, I have done that and it's fine, and I am able to go back over the top. I'm using the white now as a blender, really. Now, I started this picture a while ago, and I started with the flowers. And those flowers are really pigmented, the red shades, and I had a couple requests to do the background. And I regretted doing the flowers first, because in something like this I would do the background first, because it gets a little bit tough around those bright colors, especially with a pastel, because they're dusty. Now, this is a light blue, and I remember on the site that sells them that it's called sky blue, and it looks like I'm just sort of filling it in rather quickly, which is actually fine with a pastel. So you're kind of roughly going around the clouds and carefully going around those bright pigmented flowers and stems. When you look at the sky, when you're outside, if you look up, the sky is bluer, and as you go down toward the horizon, it gets lighter. So although this is a light blue, I use the most pigment up at the top of the picture. I'm gonna do a couple layers of sky, because when I did this first, it is a pretty blue, but I wanted it to be a little bit more impactful. I wanted it to be brighter. So first I did the sky blue, and then I went over it with almost like a teal color, which I'll show you in a bit. So now I'm taking a stump and I'm blending. And I'm not being super careful around the clouds. First of all, because there's no color there. And secondly, because the edges of the clouds do not have to be perfect. In fact, I like it when they're not. The blue blends in. I'm going to add a little bit of a gray to the clouds also to make them look realistic. And as you can see, when you blend it, it makes it look lighter. I'm being careful down here around those brighter colors. For the lighter parts at the bottom near the horizon, many times you can just move color from one area to another, meaning you don't actually have to put the color on the paper with the pencil. You can pick it up from a darker area and move it because it's on the stump. Obviously it won't be as dark as if you put it there with the pencil, but that's exactly the effect that we want down toward the horizon anyway. Now I'm taking a brighter blue and I'm kind of going in circular motions, not filling in the entire area because there is a base there. And I'm going relatively dark up on top. And then as you can see, as I go down, I'm pushing less hard and even filling in less areas. Again, not perfect around the clouds. And those little seagulls that I drew in the back that are black because they're in the distance, you can go right over the top of them with the pastels, and they will get lighter, but you can go over them again with either a black pastel or a graphite pen. Now, okay, I'm going around the clouds and I'm going in circular motions here, but I'm not being perfectly careful once again at the edges because it's okay if it steps into the cloud area. Now this is the same gray that I used for the seagull. And I'm going in quick half circular motions to make details on the cloud. When you look at a blank area like that, you kind of have to, well, if you want to make it look more puffy or add some depth and definition, you just kind of have to figure out where you want the clouds to look like they're receding and where you want them to look like they're coming forward. And it's good to remember that dark recedes and light accentuates or brings forward. Now I'm taking a white pencil and right over the top of where I did those marks with the gray, I'm blending right over the gray and into the rest of the cloud. It gives a really nice effect, and it also softens the lines that are already there in the coloring book, which is another, it's another plus. Being careful around the red. And the circular movement makes for a puffy looking cloud. Now this white is almost acting like a stump also. If you color right over the gray area and then move to another area, it takes little minuscule pieces of the gray and colors along with the white. So you're creating puffiness even in the center where there were no marks before. So the cloud looks more three-dimensional now. I made that cloud a little bit longer. And then I'm going to go in and do the same thing with the white. Doesn't have to be perfectly defined. Sometimes clouds just look like lines in the sky. So those are pretty, and they're simple to do. And really, we only used 2 colors. Now I'm going over the sky with the white, blending it in a little bit more. I wouldn't really have to do that if I had taken more time and drawn those lines to begin with more evenly. But to save time for the video, I did them quickly, and I just wanted to show you that you can go over, and it looks very nice. Now I was just blending with the tip of my finger. So that also lightens up the sky a bit. Now I'm blending in the gray on the bottom. Adding a little bit more gray. Not quite rain cloud gray, but it's nice to add the gray. It adds dimension. Now, the sky doesn't have to be that perfect blue either. Now, I'm not going to go into all the different colors, but sometimes the sky looks gray. Sometimes it looks yellow. Sometimes even at sunset. Oh gosh, I've seen it almost greenish and purple. Now, all I'm doing here with my favorite Pastel is just defining some of that gray. Going in and doing a little bit more details on the face. And if you're anything like me, you could do this all day long and fuss around with it and make it look prettier and prettier. Back to the legs. And just some more feather definition. I'm still doing a little bit defining, but I did want to point out that I did not bring the blue all the way down to the horizon. Right about near where the seagull's, the tip of his beak is where the horizon line is. And in the next video, I'll be doing the background of the bottom. I don't know if it's going to be sand yet or dirt. I know it's a little unusual for a seagull to be in a poppy field, but I'll figure it out. So doing a little bit more definition. So you can see that seagull smile a bit more. And that's about it for now. I'm just fussing around. I could, like I said, do this all day. I love doing the detail part. It's my favorite parts. I might make more of the feathers more apparent, or I might add more feathers on his chest. But for now, that's it. I hope you like this video. I hope you tune in next time to watch the rest of the background. I hope if you liked it, you subscribe and you hit the little bell so you get my notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course here. So once again, thank you, and have a good day. Bye.